Hi, Mara, it's Doug. I've joined.
Everybody's
Hi Doug, I see you and I see Michael. We're just waiting for one more, which is Angela. The other way. We've got about another minute, so I'm gonna pause this momentarily and we should start in just about another minute.
Awesome.
All right, so this is the Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. The first thing on the agenda is the approval of last meeting's minutes, which was the January 10th. We have a motion to approve the minutes from the January 10th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 10th meeting minutes as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? All right. We don't have any public hearings on the agenda for this evening. Do we have any visitor comments? So moving on to new business, we do have a demolition recommendation for 528 Bacon Avenue, single family dwelling.
So I know sometimes I put a slide up. I didn't take the time to put the slide up for today. But the slide, it would basically, the staff memos on here. It's an existing dwelling built in 1956. There's nothing that we found related to the history or anything that's historic about the property. It's a one-story ranch structure. The applicant is purchasing the property. They basically purchased it a couple days ago. The previous owner had been the owner since 1992. And the request is to demolish it for a new house. So you'll see the information towards the back shows photos of the existing house. A ranch brick structure with some siding. And then the occupancy inspection is a standard, there's some items and things that would have been needed to be done if it was going to continue to remain as an existing structure for whether for sale or for rent.
But not much. Right?
Not much. So if there's any questions at all.
Based on our criteria, there really is no reason to vote against it, and it's just a shame because it seems like it's a sound little house in nice condition, basically, except for a few little nuts and bolts items.
I agree with you.
Yeah, unfortunately, where the location is, it's prime developer territory.
Be nice to find some developers to build some affordable housing.
Or at least.
Yes, yeah. Number one, that would be the choice, yeah.
Questions? Do you have a motion to approve demolition of 528 Bacon Avenue?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
For demolishing 528.
All those approved? Is
I,
Aye.
there anyone opposed?
All right, so thank you everyone for being here. I'm gonna let our guests introduce themselves, but I also thought it would be great if you all could also introduce yourselves to them. We met with them earlier, both Ann and myself, to kind of go over our audit that's supposed to happen every 4 years, but hasn't happened since 2017.
Almost 6 years.
Almost 6 years. So we went through that this afternoon. They did have a lot of the information about the members of the commission. But it would be great if you want to introduce yourselves, and then I'll set up their PowerPoints. Which one's going to be, are you doing? You're going to do yours first, so I'll put yours up first. And then we'll go through that, and this will count as our annual training between the two presentations. And then I think other than that, I'll let you guys start introducing yourselves. We'll probably start with those in the room, and then we'll go to the couple on Zoom.
Well, it's nice to see you again, and I'm Ann Halvox, and I'm the chair.
I'm Carol, thank you.
I'm Angela Thompson, and did you want us to?
I know, yeah, maybe tell a little bit, just say I'm a
Retired architect, I put down the pencil mostly after 30 years. And I also serve on the Architectural Review Board and on the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'm working on my own old house now.
I'm Angela Thompson, and I am an architect as well. And I used to serve on the Architectural Review Board. I did that for a while. And I have worked in historic preservation for about 30 years now with the federal government and state governments and renovated projects. So I've done Section 106 and all those kind of things.
You know the drill.
Have my own house as well too.
There's like, we have job openings at Ship.
We do need an architect.
Yeah, I think there might be about 50 of those. It seems.
I'm Emily Shepherd. I'm the liaison council.
I'm Sue Indelicato. I'm retired and I just live in an old house, and I lived in an old house before this old house. And I'm active with the Webster Groves Historical Society as a volunteer. And so this just is pursuit of my interests.
Doug, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Doug Stanley. This is my second round of being on the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm a lawyer and not in real estate, but hopefully know some terms that are relevant for what we do. I live in a Century home here in Webster Groves and happy to serve in this capacity for the city.
Then Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. My name is Michael Rose. I'm a mental health therapist. I too live in a 100-year-old plus home, and just like the idea, old homes are fascinating. They have character. They were built with purpose. They don't just look like every other house in the neighborhood. So that's what drew me to it.
Then if the two of you want to introduce yourselves to them, and then I'll give you the mouse.
Yeah, I'm John Peterson, a certified local government coordinator for Missouri State Historic Preservation Office. Relatively new. I've just been at the job since last June.
I'm Andrew Dial. I'm the grants manager at the State Historic Preservation Office. I'm actually new to Missouri. I moved here in April, but I've gotten to know the state, getting to know the state through all of these travels to visit all the CLGs.
And I've got you ready to go. So if you want to use the mouse, you can, down in the bottom.
Stand up front there.
Oh, you can do either, whichever works. So the way, if you look over here, we actually have the video comes and shows the entire room. So you're fine either way. They're gonna hear you and see you, but if you want to come up, you can, whichever's easier. And then you can see if you, when your mouse is there, you can actually, down in the bottom corner, you can change the slides. Yep.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, or you can use the mouse. Yeah, and you can also use the wheel, I think, to go through the slides.
so I'm liable to just wheel right through them. So it was really nice to meet you all, and we had a great meeting this afternoon, and then we went on a tour of Tuxedo Park. That was wonderful. Had a good dinner. So nice to meet you. I'm just going to give kind of a brief overview of the Certified Local Government Program, why it exists, what comprises the program, and then I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, and he's going to talk about funding ideas and ideas you can do with grants and things like that. Certified local government, it kind of had its official beginnings in 1980. National Historic Preservation Act was amended to allow federal assistance to communities who would agree to do historic preservation in their communities using National Park Service Secretary of Interior standards. And those that do, they were considered certified. So we had certified local government. There's kind of a map. You can see all the certified local governments in the country. I think right now there's just shy of 3,000, like 2,900 something certified local governments. You could pretty much make out the boundaries of the country, but by this local governments. So very successful program, being over 40 years. Here's a map showing the certified local governments in Missouri. You can see we have a lot of clustering around St. Louis and Kansas City along the Missouri River area, but also pretty much throughout the state. Smallest certified local government in the state would be Arrow Rock, population 60. Clarksville is another community. I think it's 300, around 300 people in Clarksville. And then, of course, you have St. Louis, Kansas City. So we got all sizes of communities. So I mentioned the program started in 1980, but it really got cranking in the mid 80s when National Park Service put certified local government status as part of this Historic Preservation Fund grant program. And then all of a sudden now there's financial impetus to become a certified local government. So this happened in 1985. And by the end of 1986, Missouri already had 7 CLGs. So you can see here, your neighbor Kirkwood is on there. You guys came like right after that, I think 87. So,
Yeah.
so you're right up there too with the oldest CLGs in the States. This chart here kind of shows the growth of the program. So you start with 7 in 1986. 2023, we have 64. And I have a picture here of Walt Disney. The newest CLG in the state is Marceline, which is the boyhood home of Walt Disney. And Marceline became a CLG back last March. We're hoping there'll be a few more coming. There's a couple communities right now that are working on it. And so near future, we should have a few more. There's kind of a National Park Service sorts of sets like 5 requirements for a certified local government. The first one is to enforce appropriate state or local legislation for the designation protection protection of historic properties. And this is basically a historic preservation ordinance. That's kind of the first step is setting an ordinance. One of the technical assistance things that SHPO does is we'll review the ordinances for anybody looking to become a CLG. We'll also review if you're going to revise your ordinance for existing CLGs. And this is kind of important because I want to make sure the communities don't pass things in their ordinance that the National Park Service would have an issue with. So, we'll look at it and make sure that National Park Service will be happy with it. So that's one of the things we do. We encourage, you guys have done it, but we encourage anyone like creating an ordinance, revising an ordinance to send it to us for review. Establish by local law and maintain an adequate and qualified historic preservation review commission. Of course, we have here in the room and from our meeting this afternoon, you guys are doing a great job. There's some minimum requirements for the commissions that's established by the Park Service. There should be at least 5 members on the commission. You want to have preservation professionals on the commission, but of course, most communities are not going to have architects and architectural historians, archaeologists roaming around, but you want people such as some of yourselves who are just really interested and want to see a good local preservation program. So in general, you kind of have a mix of preservation professionals and just people from the community who are interested and knowledgeable about local preservation. Most of the communities aren't really as lucky as Webster Groves to have so many architects. Members' terms should be staggered and no less than 2 years in length. Should hold at least 4 meetings a year. Each commission member should attend at least 1 training session a year and then submit documentation of your activities to SHPO. So those are kind of the basic requirements for the commissions. There's just some pictures kind of illustrate, we mentioned it before, the diversity we have in the state. We have, Kansas City, and then there's downtown Chillicothe. So there's got to be some flexibility in the ordinances. There's got to be some flexibility in the commissions because each community is going to have unique needs. Each community is going to want to have, according to the political climate and things in their community, they're going to want to do things a certain way. So there is a lot of flexibility built into it so that communities can kind of tailor their preservation program to the needs of the community. It's kind of 3 sort of essential activities for the commissions of survey and designate resources within the jurisdiction of the local government, review alterations, relocations, demolitions, new construction, etc., that affects designated properties, and review all new or amended National Register of Historic Places nominations. This is also really important to the National Park Service. They very much want the CLGs to be involved with National Register nominations taking place within their community. If a nomination is made and the commission were to say that they don't feel the property is eligible for the register, then it would become very difficult actually for the property to get on the register. So you all also carry a lot of power in the National Register process. One of the other requirements here is maintain a system for survey and inventory of historic properties. There's sometimes communities get into a little bit of a issue. You guys don't have this issue, but a lot of times if a property or a district is put on the National Register, the Historic Preservation Commission will just automatically designate it as a local historic district or local landmark. And the National Park Service actually does not want that to happen. Because of the design review process, they want there to be, the homeowners to be given due process for their designation as a local landmark or a local district. So they don't want it to be kind of one and the same, like if it goes on the register, then you're going to make it a local landmark or local district. They really want you to keep those things separate and evaluate them separately for the programs. Also, you can have local properties, local districts that maybe aren't eligible for the National Register, but they're important to your community. So they also want you to have the ability to designate those locally, even if they're not on the National Register. Provide for adequate public participation in the local historic preservation program. Love to involve the public, obviously, in your local programs. This one I think is really redundant. It essentially says that you'll agree to do everything that you agreed to do in the first four things. I think it's kind of a redundant requirements. You want to have your certified local government in what we call good standing, because if you're in good standing, boost your eligibility for the Historic Preservation Fund grants Andrew would talk about. The way you maintain good standing is submit your agenda and minutes to SHPO, annual reports, participate in a CLG evaluation every 4 years. So these things. What are the benefits to being a CLG? It's a lot of work. You jump through a lot of hoops. So a lot of communities want to ask, what are the benefits? One of the big ones is it increases your eligibility to get grant money from the Historic Preservation Fund. It actually increases your ability to get that money quite a bit. You also, we're required to provide technical assistance from our office. So if you have any problems, questions, SHPO, we have National Register people, tax credit people, myself, Andrew, we're all required to give you assistance and gladly do it. Also, you participate directly into the National Register nomination process. We consider you all partners, so your local governments partnering with the state government and the federal government. And it also, by now, it's become a pretty time-tested, established framework for really how you want to operate a local historic preservation program. I think there's kind of intangible benefits that you all could tell me about a lot more than I could tell you, but having a strong local preservation program really, brings out the historic identity of the community. This is residents like this. It fosters civic pride, makes the community attractive. It helps property values. It helps tourism. It helps business. There's a lot of benefits. I kind of made this so when we see what kinds of information that the Historic Preservation Commissions and the certified local governments put online available to their citizens, I sort of made a top 10 list. You guys do a lot of these. You guys are great, but all the ones in green are the ones that I found on your website. And there might be, you might say, well, we have these other ones on there too, and you didn't find them, John. So you guys are doing most of these. But having the certificate of appropriateness process online in the forms, nomination for local landmarks and districts. If you are interested in creating a Historic Preservation Commission manual, Columbia, Missouri actually has a really good example. You can go to theirs and see theirs. It's always great to have the design guidelines online. A lot of communities do awards, recognition programs. You guys have some great brochures online about your program. You have really fantastic walking tours and stuff. Those are great. FAQs, a lot of citizens will go straight to the FAQs for information. Those are great. Having your meetings on YouTube is great. I know a few of the commissions in the state have Facebook pages, things like that. And of course, you guys actually do have this, but having information about your landmarks in your districts online too. So. How do you become the CLG? I won't belabor this too much because you already are. But if you're interested in the process, I'll really greatly gloss over this. But essentially, contact SHPO. We'll help you get started. The two big key things are to establish an ordinance and establish a commission. Those are really two big things. Once you have that established, establish some goals for what you want the program to do, along with resumes of your commission members, staff, send it all to SHPO. SHPO will prepare an application for the National Park Service, goes to the National Park Service, they'll sign it, SHPO will sign it, your mayor, city council, whoever will sign it. And then once everybody sort of signs it and the Park Service concurs, then you're a certified local government. It can take some time. It's my understanding the quickest community to get certified local government status in Missouri was 6 months, but most of the communities, it's a couple-year process, so it does take some time. And really, Andrew and I, we love to talk to you also. Feel free to contact us anytime if you have questions, need help. We'll be glad to help you. And here's some information. And I'll just turn it over to Andrew. Then if you have questions, maybe move after Andrew's done.
Switch it to his presentation. We'll try to fix, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you and try to fix the screen that was causing. See if I can get it to share. See if I can move this so that it will hide. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, that's yours. Try this one. Stop share for a second. Let's try again. Let's close. Let's close that one. Back. Oh. Share. Here. Slideshow. Beginning. There we go. Oh, it's coming back. It's gonna go on. There we go. Okay. I'm gonna send this down to you so you can move through the slides.
Online meeting I had where everyone was doing their presentation. I'll stay here since it's the commanding end of the table. Thank you, everyone. I am, as John said, as I introduced earlier, I'm the grants manager at the State Historic Preservation Office. And last week, I had a woman call into my office asking, to my cubicle in Jefferson City. She had just bought, or is about to buy, a rather lovely Victorian house down in, I think it was Springfield or Joplin. And she said it needed some work. It had some problems with the woodwork, there were some problems with the stonework, the roof needed a bit, but it was a beautiful house, had some of the original stained glass windows, and I hear you guys give out grants. And I really could use some money to help with this house. This is my forever home. Now, what can you do for me? And I'm sure you guys being historic preservation commissioners, you are not unfamiliar with this question. You may have, I'm sure you get questions like this all the time. I'm sure you've been the person asking for these types of questions on occasion. So I'm going to do two things in this presentation. First, I'm going to walk you through our grants, what we offer. which are maybe of use to you as a commission. And then I'm going to offer you some places to look for money for historic preservation projects. So that you may have an answer to that type of person, that lady who calls me asking about the Victorian mansion that she needs help with. So without further ado, with this thing, oh, there we go. So yes, our office does give out grants. We give out between $150,000 and $200,000 annually. That's what we've given out in the past. I'm not sure if we'll be able to give out that much in the future, but these things always change. But that's how much we usually distribute. The eligible applicants include government entities such as cities and counties, you guys. Also nonprofits with a historic preservation mandate. These are usually historical societies, our statewide nonprofit, MOPRES sometimes applies, things like that. Missouri Archaeological Society as well. Most of our funding we reserve for our CLGs, between 50 and 75%, varying depending on who applies and how much money we get from the Park Service. We are required to give out 10% of the grant money we receive from the federal government. Our office is funded by a federal grant, by the way. So 10% of that money has to go to our CLGs. That is a requirement of the Historic Preservation Fund money that we receive. So that you usually like to fund a little bit more than, or give out more than we're required to. So that's why I say we reserve that much. Our grants are 60-40 matches. The funding that we receive from the Park Service is a 60-40 match, so we pass that on to you. So we will supply up to 60% of a project budget. We expect you to provide the matching 40%. And each award is capped out at $50,000. You can apply for as many projects as you want. You can submit multiple projects in one grant round. But the individual project cap is $50,000. And each award has an 18-month duration to it. So if you were to apply in our upcoming grant round, which will probably open sometime over the summer, I'd like to get it open in June, we'll see. If you would apply in the summer, you would expect to do the work starting in the summer of 2024 to February of 2020, it's missing there, but 2026. We have to wait until the Park Service gives us our funding before we can pass that money on to you. Hence, there is that year delay. I'm sorry, this is part of grants management. I was looking through our grant files before I came here just to get a sense of what we've done in the past. We've given like 5 grants to Webster Groves for a variety of projects. At the beginning, it was just mostly survey and the creation of the Old Webster Historic Business District. And in the past, more recently, it's been the preservation lecture series, which I was told about just before coming here. So your guys' activities are making news at SHPO as well. There's that a memory of what you guys are doing, knowledge of it, which totals about $30,000 that we've given to Webster Groves, awarded or given. So what do we fund? We fund 3 types of projects in 3 areas: planning and outreach, National Register and survey, and then pre-construction or pre-development, as we also call it. If you were to apply for one of our grants, each one of these requires a separate application form. The types of projects are different enough that we need to ask different questions of each one, hence a different form. And there are different types of projects within each of those project areas. So I'll walk through those in a little bit more detail in the next bit. So the most self-explanatory is National Register and survey. We'll give, in the case of survey, we'll give you the money to hire a consultant to come through Webster Groves and say there is a Queen Anne style house over there. There is a 1930s car dealership over here. There's a Richardsonian Romanesque church over there. And then look at the final product and say, do we have something cohesive enough here for a district? And then potentially create a district on it. Also, National Register is pretty self-explanatory. We can give you the money to hire a consultant to fill out that National Register form to put something on the register. The forms can be rather complicated, so sometimes it's better to have a professional do it. We recognize that. In the pre-development area, we do not fund construction, but we can fund planning work for construction. So these are things like maintenance plans, feasibility studies, adaptation or flood adaptation plans in this case. On the left, you see there, this is a maintenance plan that Montauk County Courthouse just completed with our grant money. It gave them basically a shopping list of, here's what you need to fix with your courthouse in the next 5-10 years, et cetera. And here's how much we expect it to cost, so that they could then plan their maintenance activities. On the pre-construction side, the flood side, the Park Service recently came out with these guidelines that suggest, here are the things we recommend to do to prepare for a potential flood. Here are some of the things we suggest avoiding. So if you had a particular property that you wanted to adapt using those guidelines, our grant money can be used to do so. And the Park Service has other such guidelines out there that you could use for other projects. In the planning and outreach category, this is a bit more of a grab bag. It encompasses everything from preservation plans to commissioner training to walking tours, that type of stuff. So on the left there is a preservation plan. This is sort of like a mission statement or a vision statement, a master plan of the city. This is one specifically oriented toward preservation. We recommend that most CLGs have a preservation plan of some type. It helps you to recognize what you have, or where you are, and think about ideas of where to go in the next 5-10 years in the future. The Park Service requires us to have a statewide preservation plan to update ours every 6 years. We're about to start that process next year. If you want to see what the statewide one looks like, you can go online. I'm not that thrilled with it, but I'm also in charge of writing the next one. We also will fund design guidelines. As commissioners, you're probably well familiar with design guidelines, but we can fund the writing or the updating of design guidelines. Brochures, walking tours, things like that. In the middle is a brochure that Joplin just put out with our funding that told property owners, here's what it means to be in a historic district. Here are the Secretary of the Interior standards. Here's the COA process. Here's some stuff about tax credits, all of that stuff. If that would be useful, find us for funding. We can also fund lectures, as you know, we've done that in the past year. Workshops. We're funding a workshop in St. Genevieve that should be happening sometime over the summer, I think. That's more on the technical side. So things like that. And then on the right there, there is a national organization of preservation commissioners, NAPC. They are a group that is of preservation commissioners by commissioners for commissioners. They have a biannual conference once every other year. I think that's the right. Last year was in Cincinnati in July. John and I went. We learned a lot of great stuff. They had a short course there where they walked you through everything from the interior standards to here potential funding opportunities, like all the things that can be linked together to make a project work. The Park Service was there talking about their grants. It was a great time. The next one is in 2024 and it's in Palm Beach, Florida. And commissioner training is one of the things that our grants fund. So you're welcome to apply to our grants for things like that, or to send people to there. We also have, or NAPC also runs a program called CAMP, Commissioner Assistance and Mentorship and Mentoring Program.
Okay.
Where they will bring in commissioners to Webster Groves, and they will do a day-long training session from a menu of topics that you can pick from. If you want expertise in those areas or need things in those areas. Carthage is doing a design guidelines update. And so last year they just got a grant from us to do a camp training specific to design guidelines. And now they just applied for the grant for design guidelines themselves, but specifically to prepare them for that process and walk them through that. So those are what we fund. There are some things we do not fund. We do not fund individuals. Only organizations can apply. We also do not fund construction. It's big, it's complicated, it's expensive, there's a lot of rules that go with it. We're just not doing it this time. Maybe in the future, not now. Archaeological digs. SHPO is also interested in archaeology, not just architecture. People tend to forget that. But we can fund archaeological surveys and things like that as well. But the digs themselves, archaeological excavations, that we're not able to do. And we are also not able to fund permanent exit interpretation, things like museums. That's a requirement put onto us by the Park Service. Whoever designed our grants did not want us funding house museum exhibits. There's also some fine print that comes with our grants. These grants are federal money, so they come with federal strings, which we then have to pass on to you. The biggest of these is 2 CFR 200. These are the comprehensive rules around federal grants, just in general. So you have to follow those. And then there's a specific set of rules around the Historic Preservation Fund. So you have to follow that. The Historic Preservation Fund, by the way, from whence this money derives, is a pot of money that is managed by the National Park Service that comes from oil leases off the continental shelf or offshore. So oil companies are required to put $150 million a year into that. And Congress decides how much of that goes out the door to us. The work also has to be completed by someone who meets federal qualifications. Usually that means being an architect, an architectural historian, archaeologist, a historian. I think they have a preservation professional written more broadly, but it has certain educational requirements, usually master's degree and some other stuff. But it's not just an ordinary person off the street or a bunch of volunteers that can do this. It has to be done by somebody that those qualifications. Missouri also requires certain procurement standards. Usually this means going out for bid. Those of you who are architects are probably familiar with the whole process. Also, for any pre-construction planning, it must follow SOI standards. Again, you guys are probably familiar with SOI standards. Oh, I did that one. I'm rolling this the wrong way. There we go. So before we go any further, any questions about our grants? Before I move on to talk about our grants. Okay. So as you can see, these types of grants would not be that helpful to that person who's got the broken roof down in southeastern Missouri. And indeed, these are specifically tailored to our CLGs. They're designed to support you in your work and to lay the groundwork for property owners so that they can apply for other funding, which is why much of our funding is reserved for CLGs. So how would I answer that person who calls in asking about, do you have grant money for my house? So my first question to them usually is it located on the National Register of Historic Places? Webster Groves is in a rather nice position that a lot of places are on the National Register of Historic Places. But if you're ever wondering whether, and I was told that you guys have a lot of good lists online already and a good sense of what's there, but if you ever need to know how to find out what's there, on our website, we have an online map. There's the list of links on the right-hand side of our webpage that will take you to the map, and if it's in the green blob, it's in the National Register District. And then if it's in a historic district, we have a list of nominations by county. You can search the specific nomination to find whether it's a contributing resource. I'm assuming most people already know this, but this is a refresher course. This is a rather grab bag talk for a lot of people. So I'm speaking of it's a useful refresher. If it is on the National Register of Historic Places, my next spot is usually to talk to them about tax credits. The federal government and the state of Missouri both offer tax credits for historic preservation. The federal government, it's 20% of qualified rehabilitation expenses for income producing properties. Excuse me. The state is 25%, also for income producing properties, but they also allow for owner occupied residential properties as well. So there's a little bit more flexibility. And I understand that there is a bill going through the legislature that is tweaking the tax credit process. It's still in the process of figuring out exactly how it will change things. But if you're interested in tax credits, at least the state side, keep an eye out on that, because there may be news coming at the end of the legislative session in June about how that exactly shakes out. But that is there. Work with the tax credits has to follow SOI standards, and the property has to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. There is a possibility it can start the process being unlisted, but there's a certain point at which it must become listed. I'm not sure exactly what that is. There are other people who are expert at this. There's a lot of terms and conditions and fine print that goes with tax credits. If you have questions, the links there are people who can answer them, call our office. I'm going to talk more about grants. But this is usually where most the financial opportunity that most property owners are able to take advantage of because it is the broadest written. So now I'm going to talk more about grants, and a bunch of these are going to be federal grants. So I want to talk a little bit about the requirements that go along with them before we get much further. So for federal grants, the site usually has to be either listed on the National Register or eligible for listing. The National Park Service has a rather nice requirement where they can allow nomination to the register to be part of the grant project. So you can both fix the property and nominate the property in the same grant, which is kind of cool. There's downsides though. If you get halfway through and discover it's ineligible, but ideally that doesn't happen. I haven't heard of that happening yet. The work must follow SRI standards, that's pretty clear. And then usually the federal government likes to take or to preserve its investment in the property. If it's paid money to fix your roof, it wants to make sure that you don't go and change your roof 2 years later. Or sell it to somebody else who changes that roof a bit later. And so they require putting in place an easement on that property. Usually with a term-based, a sliding level or based on the amount of funding that you receive from it. The more funding, the longer the easement. And then finally, there are other limitations that depend on the grant program itself. Each one is unique. Each one has some of its own, particular quirks. One example of a grant program that has some quirks to it, but is also very popular, is the Save America's Treasures grant program. This is done by the National Park Service. They will offer you significant amounts of money, as you can see there. For either building preservation or for archival conservation. This works with both types of, so preserving in both senses and treasures in both senses there. The property though must be listed on the National Register at a national level of significance. There are 3 types of levels of significance on the register: local, state, and national. This has to be national. This is Save America's Treasures, not Save Webster Groves Treasures. But as wonderful as that would be. The other wonky thing about it is that it can only be used once. So if you use it to fix flood damage in the basement, and then the next year a tornado takes off your roof, sorry, you've used your one bullet. I'll have to look elsewhere.
Is that only for public property or is it can be used for private property as well?
That can be used for private property as well.
Can it be stacked with tax credit?
That I'm not sure about. You'd have to ask the folks about that. I'd be surprised if you didn't do that. I honestly don't know. We're the only ones who require it to be publicly owned, and that's because we want to reserve our funding for properties that do not have access to tax credits. So these are things like county courthouses, city halls, any schools have gotten them. Swimming pool, public swimming pool has gotten one. That type of. So that's the reason we do that. Yeah, but Jasper County Courthouse has gotten one. The Missouri Botanical Gardens, just up the road here, got one to fix the stone wall that goes around there. If you drive into downtown St. Louis, what's the community center we saw last time?
Oh,
What's the college?
Airstone University.
Airstone, that's it.
Sean.
They're built, turning an old African-American community center into a jazz conservatory. And they're doing that with Save America's Treasures. So yeah, there are a bunch of those throughout the state. It's one of the more popular ones. If the site has African-American heritage to it, if the National Register nomination lists African-American ethnicity as the reason for its significance, then it could be eligible for a grant from the National Park Service, again, for through their African-American Civil Rights Program. They interpret civil rights broadly to mean essentially most of African-American history, since all of African-American history is arguably a struggle for civil rights. That will fund up to, it also funds either construction or history work, so like oral histories, archival conservation, that type of. And most of the National Park Service grants do not require a match. It's just straight up, they give you the funds right out of the Historic Preservation Fund. But again, the site must be listed in the National Register. The National Trust for Historic Preservation also has several funds for African American history. The top of which is one of the top is the most broad. The bottom two are a little bit more particular and nuanced, but they do exist. And I have had calls from people who could take advantage of these grants, so I sent them information about that. For underrepresented communities, a bit more broadly, the National Park Service has a grant program that's designed specifically to diversify the National Register of Historic Places, so that it's not just a bunch of old white people's mansions on this. It can also be African American churches and archaeological sites and various other things. This does not fund construction, but it does fund all the steps that will put up to putting something on the National Register or amending the National Register nomination. They also have an equal rights grant program, which does fund construction. So if you have properties in Webster Groves that are part of that push for civil rights or that push for equality, these would be things to look into, places to apply for. For churches, at least once a month I get a call, or once every 2 months I get a call from the church asking for funding. There are a lot of churches with aging congregations and beautiful historic spaces that need help. The National Fund for Sacred Spaces offers grants for churches. They have to have active congregations. They have to be significant enough to put on the NR. I don't think it's specific to the NR. But they do, that is the place I usually send historic congregations for that. Need to figure out between these things scrolls. Cemeteries. There is a big need for funding for cemeteries. At least once a month, somebody calls into my office asking for money for cemetery maintenance. Also, at least once a month, somebody discovers a log cabin on the back of their property and calls into my office asking for money to fix up or move said log cabin. So if you want to create a grant program for historic preservation, cemeteries and log cabins apparently are what people most need. I have yet to find a good grant program for cemetery maintenance. Our grants can't really do that much with them. We can do some ground penetrating, like our radar work, in order to either put something on the register or upkeep something that's on the register through our pre-development. We can do that type of thing. But our office also does workshops on cemetery maintenance. John is one of the people who organizes those workshops. We do 2 of them a year. So if you know of a cemetery in need that you want us to come out and teach people how to clean headstones, talk to John. There's also a couple of places that can offer training and guidelines and things like that. The Chicora Foundation being one. The National Park Service has a National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. That was written by a bureaucrat. Mouthful. But both of them will offer guidance on what best techniques to use. For museums, for historical societies that have old house museums and things like that, the Jeffers Family Foundation offers money to do a historic structure report, which will tell you what is wrong with your historic property. They will can also offer challenge grants to help you fundraise to fix site property. This is my go-to grant recommendation for museums. There's also the National Trust runs a fund for historic interiors. This grant program I've heard has much demand to it and is therefore very competitive. But it is there and it does give out funding. With the requirement, there is a membership requirement about being a member of either the Preservation Leadership Forum or Main Street America. But if you are a member of either of those 2 organizations, the National Trust has funds specifically for those organizations. I think the top 2 would apply to Webster Groves. The third is for small towns, which I'm not sure exactly how since you're part of the St. Louis metro area, that may not work. But anyway, these are also very competitive because they will fund pretty much anything. So they're another place to apply for preservation money. You guys are near Route 66. Is Webster Groves on 66?
We are on
You are on
66.
66.
Yes.
There is grant funding for Route 66. There is a Route 66 Association of Missouri, and it offers grants. I didn't put this on here, but it also offers grants for neon signs as well, Missouri neon signs. Which I think is really, yeah. Park Service also had, I'm not sure if they're still running it, cost share program for Route 66 as well. And then John clued me into this one last month. There are the parks, the National Trust runs a program for historic restaurants. The deadline is coming up. I'm not sure when exactly in March it is, but
Be passed.
might be passed. Okay, well, remember it for next year, because if you have a restaurant that has been in place for a while and you have the ability to nominate it. Members of the public can nominate these things. So they will help to preserve historic restaurants.
You know how old they have to be?
I have no idea.
I
And that's,
tried looking it up, so when I saw it come through, I think John sent it through and I was like, ooh, maybe I can, and I just couldn't think of one for us. I could think of other things, like I was like, oh, down in Kimmswick or the Blue Owl, or I thought of other places.
I think it's
No.
changed owners. but-
Yeah. No,
Is it the business that needs to be old or the building?
it was really like, it was for the restaurant, so, yeah.
So the business.
Yeah, the business.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have anything that, yeah. But I looked at it, it came through and I was like, ooh,
But the churches one, I'm like, oh, we
oh, I've already wrote that
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
A restaurant would probably be like a crap.
Operation that funds
Yeah.
like T-Mobile or AT&T or something like that. but
Yeah, it was like kind of a big deal.
corporations can do great things if they want to. They can be very involved when they want to. When they get that pat on the back for it. Speaking of corporations doing great things, or funding grant programs, T-Mobile, the cell phone company, they have a grant for small towns. Again, I'm not sure the eligibility requirements and how they apply, but they are shelling out up to $50,000 for community development projects. This one is not specifically historic preservation, but it can be used to fund historic preservation projects.
It's a great shot.
I know, it's such a lovely.
Out in
picture.
Missouri, right?
Ozarks are a little bit older than that. Yeah. But Excelsior Springs is that.
Oh.
And then if you want to do something with training, I know you guys have done lecture series in the past. If you want to do something more hands-on, we have a dearth of trained contractors in this state. Their SHPO, our grants can be used to fund workshops and such. The National Park Service has grants for technology and training, where they will give you money to do, again, workshops, practical preservation methods, such like that. If you wanted to do one next year.
Still wants.
Yeah. I was looking through our old files, our old photo files, to try to find something. This is one that we did at a statewide conference a while back.
Yeah, if you want to see some examples, and their videos are actually online, but Excelsior Springs and St. Genevieve, they have some.
And this is an opportunity that you guys, being located in St. Louis County, have a unique ability to take advantage of. The Port Authority has a community investment fund that will fund community development projects. Again, not designed specifically for historic preservation, but can be used for preservation projects if we need a source of funding. Normandy, we were at Normandy a couple months ago. And Normandy used one to do, I think, a structures report on an old building. And if you're like me and you've gotten to the end of this list and gone, well, there's nothing that really fits my favorite project or my house. We have a statewide nonprofit that specializes in historic preservation called Missouri Preservation, very creatively. They have a list of funding opportunities on their website. from which I cribbed most of this presentation. They also have a statewide conference for preservation that is happening in Joplin in June. We will be there. We'd be happy to see you there. And then the National Trust also has a lengthy list of grants. I pulled out the most relevant ones and put them in this presentation, but you're welcome to look around for more. And also, if none of these have sparked your interest, there's always the opportunity to build your own grant program at the city level. Several cities in Missouri have grant programs that they run for preservation. A lot of them focus on facades, hence the picture of the facade there. I get the sense that the money for this can actually come from the state. The state has some of the other departments in the state give money for economic development and that type of thing, because they use that to fund historic buildings. That's one opportunity. Another is to create a revolving fund. So we at the state level have a revolving fund that we use. We have used it in the past to fund or to buy up historic structures that are in need, that have no other future to them, that are probably going to be demolished. We would use it, we would buy up the property and then hold it until somebody came along who had a good idea of what to do with it. And then we would sell it back to that person. And so the money that went in would then come out, or went out would then come back in when we sold the property, hence revolving fund. We've also used it to give out loans. We give out loans for courthouses. So once again, the money goes out, the money comes back in. I will warn you, there is an organization that will fund feasibility studies to see whether or not that's something that would work here or do work well here, called the 1772 Foundation. Joplin just got a grant to create a historic preservation fund from the 772 Foundation. They can use it to do a feasibility study, and then they'll give you the seed money to start the fund itself. I would warn you, if you decide to create one of these, you are getting into either the real estate market or the financial services market with all of the risks thereof and complications thereof, but you can save properties that are otherwise unsavable. The Paquette Rabeau house is one of the ones that we held on to for 6 years back in the 90s, and it is today owned by a winery. It's down in St. Genevieve. So if you're down there next time, you can check it out.
Yes, that's the one that's like a wine tasting place now, right?
Yep, that's the wine tasting place. Yeah, we still have an easement on it. We're just taking pictures of it somewhere there. So, conclusion, for property owners, where would I direct property owners to look? Historic preservation tax credits is usually the first place. And then if they fit one of those eligibility requirements, I would send them to look for the right grant opportunity if it's there. For you guys as historic preservation commissioners, apply to one of our grants. Hopefully I'll be opening the application cycle in June. So you're welcome to apply. They're designed for you. I would also recommend using our grants or thinking about ways to lay the groundwork for property owners to apply for other opportunities, that they would be eligible to do so. You guys are one of the few people that can create a historic district by applying for funding for it and then doing the big work necessary to bring a lot of properties onto the register. And then if you want to have the political will to do it, creating your own grant or loan program that is something that you can control, that you can decide where the need is and who gets the money, is something that can really benefit your community. And I'll end with this last slide. So these are things that make me really shout and jump for joy, and things that really make me bump my head against the wall. So on the left, these are some news headlines that have come out in the past couple of years of communities in Missouri that have gotten large sums of money from the federal government for preservation projects. I love it when we get large sums of money from the federal government and bring them to our state. I think that's a good thing. On the right, the National Trust for Sacred Spaces has a map on their website of all of the projects they have funded across the country. That is Missouri. That makes me bow my head a bit in shame because I think we can do better. I will say these particular grants are very competitive, but the Park Service also has a similar maps on its website, which looks similarly there. So hopefully that's a bit of motivation. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for inviting us both here.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
Any questions, anyone?
I feel like I'm kind of processing a lot of things.
I know.
After the meeting.
And say, I know I wrote down a few that I think would be ones to look at or consider for the community. So I know that the Hawken House recently applied for some funding for looking at a structural evaluation of their particular property. And they have a small museum essentially, or their archive. So looking at that Jeffers Family Foundation sounds great. And I know we have quite a few churches within the community. We also have some historically Black churches within the community. There might be a way to tie in between the two of them for some of that. And then I know we've had someone who has come to the city council to talk about a particular property that they feel might be under fire at some point in the near future. It's already local, but not national. And so I keep getting emails about the Ozark Theater across the way. So looking at that and the St. Louis County Port Authority or some other thing about if we should want to try to do the next step for National Register, what we would need to do and that kind of thing. But just because I know it's come up many times. I got another email today about it.
From multiple people?
No, same person. Yeah. And then a Historic Preservation Commission manual. I'm gonna look at that one from Columbia.
Yeah, and you know, there's not any good examples out there, so Columbia is probably about the better ones.
Great.
So I have a question about the workshops. You said there's a couple communities that do them, and they do them for the community at large, like to invite in the average person sort of thing, or?
Yeah, the community's invited. One of the big hopes is that like local contractors will come to pick up some new skills and be able to do, you know, like Secretary of Interior standards or buildings. So like St. Genevieve's done these. I think they did siding, windows, and I think this year they did floors. And then Excelsior Springs has done siding and plaster. I don't remember, but they actually have videos of all of them on their websites. Those two communities.
It doesn't matter that, so say, could it be something that is historic preservation and environmentalism as a combo? Is that an acceptable thing to do, or does it need to be just historic preservation, or does that?
It can be both.
Oh,
It can be both. I know one of the things that have recently been that they talked about at the NAPC commission last time, but design guidelines was what to do with solar panels, how to write design guidelines for solar panels. So those types of questions are coming up. But yeah, as long as it follows the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Oh,
And the grant manual requirements, yeah,
okay.
that's fine.
Something that crosses my mind would be to look into an opportunity to get young people interested in preservation arts, like maybe people who are really not really going to college is their jam. And, you know, we're losing so many skilled trade folks that preservation trades that are especially jeopardized, that might be a really cool thing to like expose our high school kids to.
Yeah.
We hear that from people that they have a hard time finding contractors. Skilled people to do this things.
Yeah, I've often thought that as Webster grows, we have this plethora of opportunities for people to work on old houses and find out what the heck would you do here or there, and lots of people have no idea what to do, you know, but it's not, some of it's not that hard to learn.
I've been YouTubing myself and I'm surprised what I can actually do when somebody's telling me.
If you're interested in workshops like this, you might contact like Mara's counterparts in Excelsior Springs and St. Genevieve's.
Okay.
Gentleman in St. Genevieve's named David Bova, but I'm not sure. Excelsior Springs. they've been doing this, and one of their intentions is to hopefully train. good people.
Well, they're the same, with a large group of old towns.
Yep.
Yeah.
A nice idea, something that we could provide as a community service.
Yeah.
And like to the contractors that, service Webster like that. Not just contractors in Webster, but like in the area who work in Webster as well.
And homeowners.
Yeah, I
too.
think
Oh, no,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. But I feel like
Homeowners and handyman.
we hear that we've got a rep for being tough to work in, right? But if we can kind of give a carrot of like, here's the training, that's available, that might be, like, might help with that area.
Right,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah, well, we need the people who, because there's plenty of people out there who know what to do, there's the, it's not quick and dirty. Those people are never gonna come.
Yeah.
You don't want them here anyway.
Yeah. No,
So,
yeah,
but the homeowner knowing who to,
yeah,
there's a lot of advantage to a homeowner even having some idea of what that all means.
yeah.
And really for some homeowners, I know. Old house people here, if you can't find somebody, you're like, okay, well, it needs to be done, let me.
Let's
Go for it.
Trainings could be like a little bit of a networking too, because you could be like learning how to patch your own plaster and next to a contractor working, I'd be like, do you wanna? No job.
If you really
Yeah,
swap skills, yeah,
That's it,
yeah.
The contractors will learn, these are the standards we have to put our work to.
Yeah.
And the property owners will learn, these are what we can expect. This is the level we should expect from them.
And then too, it would be very appealing as marketing for contractors to say, hey, we have this know-how, we do this work, we've done this work that's acceptable in this community. Because as we all know, who are working on the whole houses here.
yeah, that's true, because you don't know when you hire somebody, that they could talk a good story, you have no idea.
lots of ideas.
Yes.
I'm really, kind of excited about the opportunity to kind of expose people to dying preservation arts. Because, if they don't know, they don't know, so it might spark something.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
You guys have very impressive community here. We spend some time before our meeting driving around looking at your district.
And I'm glad you were able to see, so you got to see the Tuxedo Park bed and
Yeah,
breakfast.
we talked to the woman there for a while.
Yeah. And that one did use historic tax credits.
So yes, we got an earful about historic.
Yes,
You're like the other end of
yeah.
from the other ends.
And then were you, you could have picked anywhere, but did you end up going to Perennial?
Yep. Yeah.
So I let them know, I'm like, it's because that's another historic structure that's been reused. That's in the old Webster National Register District.
Or Sierra Mills would be another good one. I mean, that get reused kind of.
Oh, that's not a historic
Oh,
structure.
it's not.
Mm-mm.
Not really limited on old buildings with restaurants.
I know. I went through it. I'm like, something in the National Register that would be a good option, that also, had a different twist on, so I sent them the National Register sheet with the information about the structure.
Yeah, we were intrigued too. You mentioned the Ozark Theater. We haven't drive by there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
beautiful building.
isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, the inside,
And then what?
it's a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, the inside needs a lot.
There are definitely people worried about that.
Yeah, the owner of the Mr. Stevens passed away just last month. So there's been a lot of conversation about like what's going to happen to it in regards to the particular property, but it is already locally designated. It's just not nationally designated.
Be interesting to see.
Doug, Michael, if you guys have anything else, if not, we might just move on to a discussion of next month's meeting.
I'm good.
I don't, I think it was a very informative session. It's interesting that Arrow Rock is a historic preservation designation. We were driving through that area recently and I wanted to go see it. And my wife, who went to Mizzou, had talked about how cool it was and historic, but she says a long distance down to it. So we didn't make it, but it's really very interesting to see what is designated in the state throughout, and St. Genevieve in particular too, just because of its age and the efforts that have gone in there. And I think that Webster Groves is trying hard to preserve, and we're just happy that you took the time and effort to come here.
And we're happy to be here.
And thanks, Doug, for, I know, zooming in from out of town.
Just fine. I'm glad I was able to.
So the only thing on the agenda is our next meeting. I told a couple people ahead of time, I have a conflict for that particular date. So if we don't get any applications for any demolitions, we have a couple options. We could just cancel that meeting, focus on May. Everybody come back together with what do we think our next project should be. If we have a demolition, I might need to move it to another date or try to find another. I don't really have a staff member. I mean, I know Travis came the one time and he laughed. He said he felt like it should be a drinking game every time it was Mara says, or Mara does, or Mara. He said every time my name was said that he probably should have had a drink. So we could change the dates to another time, but I didn't really look at my calendar closely and booked something. So yeah, I'm US Women's National Soccer at the new stadium or HPC. Sorry, soccer's gonna win out. So I mean, I could wait until the deadline, which is still, I think, another week away. I'll have to look. And then we can make that decision. But I figured I'd ask all of you, would you like to, if we have no demolition requests or a certificate of appropriateness request, we could just cancel if you all wanted to do that, or we could, move it to another date.
I'm fine with it either.
Yeah, I'm too.
Okay. Doug, Michael, I hope you're okay with sort of either moving it if we can find another date, or because we're down to 6 members and we need 5 for a quorum. I've also sort of talked about the possibility of asking the council to look at the option of a temporary, like right now it's a quorum of the total of 9 members versus a quorum of 6. With a quorum of 6, we could have a quorum of 4, which would be great, at least while we're trying to build up and get additional members. But right now we have to have 5 in order to meet. All right, I will wait until I see if we get any requests. I know, just FYI, and I don't know whether they're going to come in again, but you all had approved the pool house on Mason to be demolished, but we'd specifically said it didn't yet include the garage. They have to come back if they were going to do the garage. It has changed to a new owner. I spent probably an hour and a half with them about this. They're going to come back to Architecture Review Board with a totally different project. But I spent quite a bit of time with them about the district and the guidelines and the zoning and all the different things. So they're considering everything. So there might be a chance they might come back about the small detached structure. They know that the pool house, which was built in like the 80s, has already been given permission for demolition.
That was in rough shape.
That was in really rough shape. That's the only one I know.
I'd like to mention that because I live on Mason Avenue. This is Doug.
Yes.
The garage is tiny. It was built
Yes.
and it's not serviceable for a meaningful garage for anyone to use. And so I think that, it makes sense for them to be able to build a more modern garage. It could still look architectural, and fit with the house, but it really is unserviceable.
Well, and technically, which I tell people all the time, they still have the ability to build one on the lot because that would be considered their second, like could be considered a second accessory structure. They might still need to get a variance because the size, it's just big enough to be a little too big. And we'd run, I'd talk with them through all those numbers, but there is a chance they might come back. So that we would have, that would be the certificate of appropriateness, because it's in the historic district.
And maybe depending upon where it's sited, there might be an opportunity for a new garage, but then maintain the little one as an accessory structure, like, a new pool house or something. That could be really cool.
Yeah, and we've talked to them. The
Yeah.
only thing is they can't change any walls, openings, or anything else because it's too close to the property lines. So they would need multiple variances.
Okay.
Yeah, so they need multiple variances to continue to use.
One of those about that far.
Yeah, it's like this far from the property, yeah. But again, I don't think that they're coming in for anything anytime soon, but I did give them the deadlines. So obviously, if something like that comes in, we'll need to figure out and move a date. But we should be able to, not a problem. I'll make sure I've got all of you on board to make sure we have a quorum.
Surprised it changed hands. That's. Wow, okay.
It did. Yeah. If no one has anything else,
I just wanted to say congratulations to everybody. and Thank you for your hard work on the Lustron local designation. This is technically our first meeting since the city council meeting, and I know everybody had a hand in making that happen, and I'm personally excited that we started it and got it through, and I think I'm personally excited to plan our next projects.
That was. Exhilarating.
Just to add a little thing to that, one of my buddies out in Creve Coeur texted me an article that he read about all of that and texted me. It was like, wait, is this the board that you're on? So it's pretty cool, right? He's the one who had a grandma who lived in Webster for decades. Half of his family is from here, but it was pretty cool to see that it's hitting other people around the area as well, not just in Webster.
Cool. Thank you for mentioning that.
and I can't remember if I sent you a bunch of the Lustron Facebook groups are talking about it, and they've been posting about it, which is pretty great too.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Very motivating.
Yeah.
We will hear from Brentwood.
We have my Facebook friends that have been passing on information about the district. With like local newspaper articles, they've been sharing around. So
Just really quickly, because I know we're late, I did message Mayor Arnold to see if if we've been working on the boards and commissions subcommittee, and I think we talked about the number of people on boards and commissions to try to make that more standard where we could, some are set by state. But I can't remember if we were bringing the whole number down to 7. I think we might have been, so that might help with quorum too. Great to get some new
And it was funny.
members.
I don't even know if any of you were on this long, but it used to be that there were 7 members and 2 alternates. And the alternates kept wanting to come. And so finally we were like, well, we'll just add on, we won't make alternates anymore. We'll just have 9 because we always, HPC always had like this huge group and we never had a problem filling spots. And then COVID hit and it just became much harder. And it's not just this commission, all the boards and commissions, I
Yeah.
think, are having a hard time. But yeah, my board of adjustment, we finally filled one of my alternate spots. I need another alternate spot filled. We're having it in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But yeah, we used to have, it was 7 with 2 alternates. And again, like all those alternates were like, I'm coming. And I'm like, I don't really need you. So we just made it a full 9 when we updated the code a while back.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting if we went back to 7, but it would be fine.
I'd be okay with having extra people come.
Yeah.
Well, other people can always come.
Absolutely.
That is the thing. Like you can always have other people, but sometimes they're like, but I want to serve. Like I want to be a commission. I don't want to be on a subcommittee.
Yeah, and I don't remember, there was also talk about the position that Mayor Arnold appoints to the historic preservation, or to the
Historical Society.
Historical Society, and whether that we want to make that a joint appointment. I haven't heard from her any movement on that. I'm sure there is stuff. I just don't have the update on that. And then as far as other council updates go, I'm also the liaison for Green Space, and they've been doing this eco ed like lecture series that has been pretty popular. They're at the library, and there's one coming out on Thursday this week that's about no mow for bees. So the month of April, we're gonna do like a no mow month to help those early pollinators get going. And so we've suspended the mowing ordinance for the month of April. So lawns go and try to help that, and you'll see that on the city properties as well. So if you see like longer lawns than normal in the month of April, that's what's going on, and there'll be some signs going up if you're interested in participating on a sign. So that's kind of an interesting thing, but they've got talks coming up in April. It's on I think like the Deer Creek and the River de Pere watersheds, and then in May there's another one about just like I think more about the Mississippi River maybe, and like where we are in the river shed. So some cool talks going on there. So kind of watch for those. We're trying to announce those in Webster River Times and City States of the page. So
And there will be a hearing coming up to address solar panels in historic districts. So that will be coming up before the council. There'll be letters going out to everyone in Central Webster, Webster Park, and Marshall Place, because all three of them have limitations on solar panels. So that will be a hearing open at the council. Second April meeting.
So is that to remove the limitations?
We're still looking at what, remove, limit, or change. We're still looking at, I've got the DC changes that the District of Columbia has done. I've got some other stuff. Sustainability's been talking about it with others. So we're gonna bring that one up. And they were all done in an odd way. Even though the guidelines were approved, they weren't made a part of the ordinances. So if you look back through the minutes, the council amended the guidelines, but yet the guidelines were never attached to the ordinance. So the only guidelines that were attached to any ordinance was Webster Park, but the two older ones weren't. And all of them have the exact same wording and language regarding solar panels from the 1980s. So we're gonna look at that, but it'll go straight to council for hearing. Just to address that one item. Yeah.
that's all the updates.
Thank you.
Okay. So you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Congrats again on the last round.